Larry, who's stronger when it comes to the policies in Ukraine, Starmer or Donald Trump?
Well, what do you mean stronger?
Because when you see the attack on Russia, the attack on the Russian president, on Putin's residence, which we know in the mainstream media, they said, no, that wasn't an attack on Russian president. It was an attack of something else. They
Yeah.
tried to but from the Russian sources, they confirmed that was an attack on Russian president,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah. Well, from the in terms of, if you measure in terms of the country's attitudes, not just Starmer and Trump, clearly the Brits are more obsessed with dealing with Russia, or trying to contain Russia, or trying to destroy Putin. It's just an obsession with the Brits. Has been the case, good Lord, now for more than 80 years.
How
And
about four or
heck,
five hundred?
yeah, yeah. Well, at least going back to the war in Crimea. Okay,
Yeah.
so 170 years. It is the problem the Brits have is limited capability. Um, they can be malevolent. They can, kill some people, but they're not. They don't have the power to actually tip the war in a direction that will give Ukraine an out. I've been telling people in recent. I got asked yesterday, and I said, look, this is just a simple math problem,
Mm.
and the math problem is this: Ukraine. I was told by the former prime minister, who I spoke with 5 weeks ago, and he says Ukraine's population now is down to 19 million. Russia is 150 million. Let's just assume that both sides are suffering the equal amount of casualties, which they're not. The Ukraine is suffering the disproportionate amount. And right now, it was reported yesterday that the exchange of bodies, dead Russian soldiers for dead Ukrainian soldiers, is at a ratio of 60 to 1,
Wow.
and that Russia is sitting on a pile of Ukrainian bodies that the Ukrainians don't want back. But if you just assume that both sides are suffering the same amount of losses, let's say they're suffering 1 million men a year. Well, do the math. How long can Ukraine continue the fight? Well, they'll be lucky to go 8 years, because that 19 million includes women, children, elderly. Russia's got 150 million. So just by virtue of that, there's no way that Ukraine will prevail ever. And yet, the Brits, the Germans, the French, and the United States continue to facilitate uh, their suicide, providing them weapons, providing them money, providing them intelligence, and for what purpose? Because the West has become convinced they don't have good intelligence sources in Russia. They've been relying upon what they've been told by the Ukrainians, and they become convinced the Russian economy is fragile. It's heavily dependent on oil. All you got to do is just destroy their oil sector. They're going to collapse, and we'll be able to take over the country. They really believe this, and that's what's so absurd.
It's not just about the United Kingdom, Colonel. Here is in Germany. Look at this. The teenagers were asked. Let me just, yeah. Let me just bring the, yeah. The teenagers. Let me read it for you. The teenagers were asked if they're ready for war with Russia. And when they do these sort of surveys in Germany, and you see what the way that the government is behaving, are they preparing their people to fight Russia? Do they really want to continue this conflict? And what is the benefit for Germany? You've mentioned the attitude of the United Kingdom, which we know it's imperial attitude. You can follow on that line, but what is what is in it for Germany?
The polls I'm seeing indicate that the majority of the German people are not for what policies Merz is pushing with regard to Ukraine or with regard to Russia. That's the polls I'm seeing. I don't know what the accurate figure is, but it's somewhere between 55 and 60% don't agree with it. There are different reasons listed for not agreeing with it, but all of the reasons can be interpreted to Germany does not want a war with Russia, at least the bulk of its people. I think you'd find the same thing in France. I think you'd find the same thing in that portion of the United Kingdom we call England. But it's not what their leaders feel because their leaders are tied to these policies. They're tied to these policies hook, line, and sinker. And it's the only thing they can push. And what they're trying to do is propagandize their people, if you want to use that term, I think it's accurate, in order to get enough of them on their side to carry out their policies. I don't think it's going to work. I think from what I'm seeing in the polls is you're going to see these, as I've said earlier, and will continue to say, these leaders gone in the sometime in this new year, because the election system is going to work, as awkward as it is in all three countries really now. It's going to work and kick them out of office. Then the question becomes, what is the policy of the subsequent leader? And that's difficult to determine right now because there are different situations in each one of those major countries. And in fact, there are different situations in each of the other countries too, like Norway and Finland. And we've seen the Netherlands speak, I think, at least to a certain extent. But it's not a constant feeling amongst the people in Europe that, one, they want to give up their luxurious social programs, two, they want to give it up to defense spending, and three, they want to use that defense spending to start a war. So these leaders are not representing their people.
Larry, you've mentioned that the Russian response to what Ukrainians did, the attack on Russian president, would be harsh. But after all, don't you think that the Russian president, on one hand, is thinking of the way that Donald Trump is trying to solve the problem in Ukraine? How do you see the two? Because on one side, you have to respond to what has happened. On the other hand, you don't want to escalate that much to sabotage the ongoing negotiations between the West and Russians.
Well, I would reject your statement that Trump is trying to resolve the situation between Russia and Ukraine. He is not. Um, there are a lot of things he could have done already that would have signaled an actual resolve to get the conflict settled, such as reestablishing complete normal diplomatic relations with Russia, which includes sending a top level ambassador to Moscow, someone that is known to have the full confidence and trust of Donald Trump, as well as returning the property that the United States seized during the last days of Barack Obama's presidency from the Russian diplomatic missions in the United States, to reestablishing the flights between the United States and Russia, direct flights, as well as lifting sanctions. Just say no. We're not going to keep going this route. We're going to stop. He's doing none of that. The only thing they have done is some of the Office of Foreign Asset Control sanctions that were imposed on RT, Russia Today. Those have been quietly lifted. And I discovered that when John Kiriaku's show Whistleblower came back online, and I was his first guest, I guess. And I said, "How are you doing this?" He says, they've lifted the restrictions, so he can do it now and get paid. Which under Biden they shut it down about a year and a half, 2 years ago. So there has been movement on that front. Uh, but beyond that, uh, Trump continues to entertain peace plans that are either crafted by Keith Kellogg, Captain Crunch, or the cornflakes guy, um, or Zelensky or the Europeans. None of those, whether we're talking the 28-point peace plan, the 19-point peace plan, the 20-point peace plan, none of those are acceptable to Russia at all. They are dead on arrival proposals. And Russia's terms have been made very, very clear. And while Trump has, in his last remarks surrounding when Zelensky was at Mar-a-Lago, he did, affirm the Russian position. Yeah, it's not going to be a ceasefire. But beyond that, we've not seen any concrete steps or moves by anybody in the West to come to grips with the Russian demands. And so at this point, uh, Russia's options are to win it on the battlefield. And I've been maintaining that all along. There's not a negotiated settlement here to be had. It is going to require the actual defeat of the Banderites, the Azov battalion, the right sector.
Colonel, here is what Zelensky said, his New Year message to maybe to Ukrainians.
What does Ukraine want? Peace. Yes. At any cost? No. We want the end of the war, not the end of Ukraine.
Ми хочемо закінчення війни, але не закінчення України.
Are we tired? Extremely. Does that mean we are ready to surrender? Those who think so are deeply mistaken.
Здатись сильно помиляється той, хто так думає.
Colonel, don't you think that the continuation of the conflict is the end of Ukraine, not putting an end to the conflict?
Yes, the end of Ukraine and perhaps the end of the peace in Europe. Back to what Larry said, I'm thinking about what he was saying when he was saying it, and I think the major impediment, and I may be wrong in terms of it being major, but I think it is an impediment to Trump being more forthcoming in the way that Larry suggested, is called Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham, and some Democrats too, who won't give him maneuver room, and his own national security advisor / Secretary of State, who to this point has bitten his tongue and his upper lip and been a little bit conducive to Trump's policy, would turn on him too, aided by these people in the Senate. He wouldn't do it himself within the administration, but aided by the people in the Senate who would give him a lot of backup. So Trump doesn't have a lot of leeway to do the kinds of things that Larry suggested, although they're commonsensical and they're what he should do in order to put an end to this damn thing, like he said he was going to way long ago. He can't because of his lack of maneuver room in that respect. And there are problems right now in the MAGA movement. Everything from what Charlie Kirk's assassination did and the relationship with Israel to people who are questioning Epstein even more virulently now with regard to Trump and the people in the Republican Party who are involved, undoubtedly involved, just as the Democrats like Bill Clinton are. So he's got this problem, I think, psychologically, physically, whatever you want to call it. He's in a trick bag right now.
Larry, do you score anything for the Trump administration considering the two cases, Epstein case and the Charlie Kirk, assassination? So far with Kash Patel and his administration, we haven't seen any clue about what has happened during with the case of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Is that going to help Donald Trump? Is that going to help his sort of movement or maybe the candidate they have in their mind for 2028?
Trump's problem is he's being held hostage by Israel, or he has completely surrendered himself to Israel. So with the case of Kash Patel as an example, Kash Patel is a whore, a prostitute. He has sold out to Israel, as has John Ratcliffe. The problem this creates for the Trump administration now, and it's particularly centered on the Charlie Kirk and Epstein, is in both instances, Israel is front and center.
Yeah.
The pressure being brought to bear on people who are pointing to Israel's hand, and I personally believe that members of Israeli intelligence were involved with the murder of Charlie Kirk. I think the circumstantial evidence on that is overwhelming. The motive for it is quite clear. But, this is not the first time Israel's been involved with assassinating an American political figure. It goes back all the way back to John F. Kennedy. And again, the evidence on that part, people say, oh, you're just a conspiracy theory. Just look at the damn facts.
Yeah.
The ties between what Kennedy was doing in order to try to prevent Israel from getting a nuclear weapon, and the activities of Meyer Lansky, other prominent Zionists that were involved with the nuclear industry up in Pennsylvania, and then the ties in with the CIA. James Jesus Angleton, who was honored when he died, he was honored by the Israeli government. The only CIA officer I'm aware of that got that kind of recognition and honor. So what you've got going on here is the Israelis have just they continue to act with impunity, but it's creating a real pushback and a reaction. And Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly right now are sort of the front people for that, and it just shows you how crazy these Zionists are, that they were attacking Megyn Kelly as an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
Now, if anybody knows anything about Megan's career, you could accuse her of being a water carrier for Israel. You know, she she used up a couple of tubes of chapstick from kissing Israeli ass over the years.
Yeah.
But now even she's pushing back, that recognizing these extreme attacks by the likes of Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin, that Americans are getting sick and tired of it. And there's a retired special forces NCO. He does a podcast at Valhalla VFT, and he just said, "Hey, we are sick and tired of this Israel first, America second." And he's not a big Trump supporter at all. In fact, he's quite critical of Trump. But there is that is developing, and Israel has created a problem for itself, because right now, and this gets us maybe a little off topic or shifts us to where you want to go, where they have now unleashed a new propaganda campaign designed to lay the foundation so that there will be public support for renewed attacks on Iran. And it's all centered around, all of these protests that are sweeping Iran, and Trump is weighing in. Yeah, we're going to attack Iran if they shoot any protesters. I mean, it's crazy stuff, but that this is this didn't crop up organically, because people go, "Oh yeah, we're really outraged at what Iran's doing." No, this is completely manufactured, and it has one purpose: to get the United States back involved militarily with Iran. And both the Israelis and the United States are making a damn stupid decision on that front.
And Nima, at the same time, they've re-energized and refinanced, probably Miriam behind a lot of it, their campaign inside America to make sure that their programs of dealing with anti-Semitism are rampant in every state of the union. They have it all going again, reinforced, everything from our school systems to our history books, you name it. They're writing the chapters. They're writing the Palestinians out and the state of Israel in. They're desperate in some respects.
Yeah.
And you look more and more at this and you see just how desperate they are, because they understand viscerally they're losing the young people in America, even their own Jewish friends. They're losing them.
Yeah.